Hello and welcome to this In Conversation on CNBC Africa. I'm Chris Bishop. Now, it's been the talk of the markets in the United States over the last few weeks, the listing of nCino on the NASDAQ, a global fintech company. It was the work of a man by the name of Pierre Naudé, a man born on a wine farm near Worcester in South Africa's Boerland, a man from humble professional beginnings who took his chances in the United States and prospered. And he joins us now from his company headquarters in Wilmington in North Carolina. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. When you listed your company on the NASDAQ, you caused a bit of a stir. I was just looking back at some of the figures. You were briefly valued at something like $7 billion. You went up from $31 a share to $91 a share on the day. It's settled at about $84 right now. How has that listing gone?
You know, the listing has been a fantastic experience by itself, but I think if you look at the bigger long-term picture, this is all about disrupting the status quo of banking and make it a lot more accessible and efficient of how these complex regulated processes work. So to us, it's a long-term view. We wanted to go public to achieve two major goals. The first one is the notoriety, so that we can sell into places like Germany, Italy, Spain, etc. Being a public company, as well as South Africa, Australia, Japan, we opened last year. So to me, it's all about that to get access to markets. Number two is to have a public currency. As we move forward, for strategic reasons, we may need to do some acquisitions, and that was the reason behind it. The event itself, obviously, is very exciting. I'm happy specifically for our employees and our early shareholders. This company has been in the making for 8.5 years, and it was just a fun ride.
And I understand that your staff, you could hear them cheering when they went up to $91. You say it's settled at about 84. You think that's where it's going to be there and thereabouts, looking ahead?
You know, I don't speculate about the stock price because it's quite simple. We came out at 31. We assembled a great set of investors with long-term views on the company. And that's what I'm concerned about, is to make sure that it was fair. We went to the market speaks, and you know, markets go up and down, and we will ride with that. My view is, in the long run, this company will have the legs and the innovation and technology to actually disrupt banking on a global basis. And that means subscription revenue, it's long-term revenue, and these are generational buying decisions.
And you're very much a disruptor. You're in the banking cloud space. There's a lot of disruption, particularly here in Africa at the moment amongst banks. What do you intend to do with this capital you're going to raise? How are you going to attack the market and disrupt it in the future?
The original raise was actually quite small. So it's on the balance sheet. We use it to hire people. Just to give you an idea, so far this year, we've added 125 people here in Wilmington, and we keep on hiring throughout COVID. And we'll probably add about 250 to 300 people this year out of so far 11,000 applications. So we can attract the talent. And if you want to disrupt and innovate, that's the most important thing you can do. Second to that is we will always look at little tuck-in acquisitions.
So let's go all the way back to your beginnings. You were born on a wine farm, as I said, near Worcester in the Boerland. Presumably, obviously, your forebears were farmers. Why did you decide to go the other way?
You know, I'm the last of 5 kids. My mother was a professional woman, and it just didn't appeal to me. And I would say I had a fun childhood, went to boarding school, played rugby, the same thing as most young South African boys did at the time. And when I was finished with my high school, just had no idea what to do, and ended up in Boerland Bank, wrote an aptitude test, and started coding. And I just met some wonderful people there who taught me that anything is possible. Scott Grew specifically was the CIO at the time, Chris Oosthuizen. And they gave us opportunities, second to none, sent us overseas. We looked at technologies, we installed the first ATMs. And that exposure just literally piqued my interest. And in one of these trips, I came to the US to look at technology and got training. And I was truly amazed by what I saw here.
And just how old were you when you started? And what are those sort of humble beginnings when you walked in, did an aptitude test, and then you started work? What sort of tasks did you have to do? And how did it shape you as a business person?
Well, look, initially I worked in a branch in a bank. It was simple stuff, being a teller, and we did tax returns for farmers. I still remember it, and then wrote this aptitude test, and they said, "Hey, I think you can code." Was sent to the headquarters, and they taught me coding. And after about 2 months of lessons and classes, we started coding. It was a very different time. I still believe some of the best people we have here that codes and actually program are people with a very natural aptitude towards that.
And do you remember your first pay packet, how much it was then?
I think it was 240 Rand a month.
That was good money then.
I would say it was decent. It wasn't good money.
Okay, and you during that time, you also met somebody who's going to change your life, a Springbok marathon runner. Just to set us just an idea of how that did change the way you did things.
Yeah, what a fantastic guy. Johan Dreyer came, and he went to university, so obviously he's the smart one. And I was kind of self-taught. And the two of us worked together and became very good friends and literally built the infrastructure for Moreland Bank for the first ATM networks and then integration to SaaS Switch. And that was a fun experiment. We came to the US together, traveled a lot together. And then eventually he left to start his own company. And I left for the US, but I learned a lot from him and we just became lifelong friends. And lo and behold, in 2005, got back together again when his company was acquired in Atlanta by S1 Corporation, and I came to work there.
So, as I understand it, reading up on you, that you went to the States with your family in about '87, but you were like a sort of gun for hire, as you put it, I think in your own words, in the fact that with the tech, you had to go around and find your own work and your own business. How difficult was that coming into a completely new country?
You know what the first cultural shock is? What I found in the early days is the only commonality between us and Americans is we spoke the same language. Apart from that, it's a very different place. From the way the government is structured, the way the people operate, business, raw capitalism, and just the opportunity. And it's a massive opportunity, but highly competitive. So I worked for a small company that would outplace us to these things. And then wherever the work is, you go. Which obviously is difficult on a young family, but the first 5 years I just defined as the foundation to get started here. And yes, you walk into a workplace and you just have to make friends. So in the early days, I truly believed in immersing myself. So I would read up about, in '88, the election, the politics, the baseball, the football, etc., to make that transformation from loving rugby and cricket, etc., into really following the NFL and some baseball teams. I lived in Philadelphia, became a massive Eagles fan. I'm to this day. So that's just the way you assimilate with people and get friends and make opportunities.
What about this thing about the American dream? A lot of people talked about it in the 80s and the 70s, you know, you go there and as long as you obey the rules, as long as you do things right, you can get on. What do you think of that in the 21st century in 2020?
I think it's alive and well. If you look at what we accomplished here with this company, et cetera, the one thing about the American system is that they will hire you if you can prove you'll make them more money, be more productive, be more efficient, and fit into the system. And so it's all about attitude and aptitude. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity. If you look at the global market cap of innovation, more than 70% sits in the US, and China's got about 25%, and the rest of the world 5%. So really, the things happen here if you're willing to work and willing to move around.
But I have to ask you, like the whole world is reeling from COVID-19 at the moment. I mean, millions upon millions of jobs have been lost in the United States where you are. How bad is it trying to survive it with a company like yours?
You know, we are very fortunate because we are sitting at that intersection of digital transformation. Banks now will need us more than ever because branches, you can't go there and it's understaffed, et cetera, because of COVID. So a company like us will do actually fantastic. And I think that's reflected in what you see in the markets. In the short as well as the long term, they had a paycheck protection program here in the UK. It was called CBILS. We helped Barclays there. We helped a lot of banks here and distributed over 50 billion to small business owners. To me, the saddest thing is to see your typical small business where somebody took their life savings, started a restaurant or a small business, and them suffering now in this time. I mean, it truly is going to have an impact on society. So we are in the lucky few categories of companies doing very well, but I think this is going to have a long-lasting impact.
How much do you fear for the U.S. economy right now?
I wouldn't call it fear. I would more call it concern to get people through this period. But I will tell you one thing about America. There's an ability to bounce back that is just amazing. And I see it every time. Just when you think it's at the low point it could ever go, something happens, they'll innovate, we'll find a vaccine by the end of the year, we'll start getting people ready to come back. And that's the ingenuity of the system, is that individuals and people will drive the comeback, okay? The government will assist where it can. But by definition, this government is set up in a way where it's not as efficient. On the other hand, it allows freedom and people to actually innovate and come back.
Let's just talk a little bit about your business now, nCino. What led you to this disruptive fintech business that you're at the head of now?
Through the years, as I progressed in my career, I ended up in Atlanta with Johan, and I worked with a gentleman there, Chip Mahan from Live Oak Bank. It was an online banking company, and he came to Wilmington, started a bank, and they needed a specific type of software to originate commercial loans on. Struggled with what they could find, uncovered the cloud, built a little in-house system. It's a small bank, 5 billion assets, and realized maybe there's something here that, because of the agility of the platform and the software, and called me up just from past experience working with me and said, do you think we can start a company? And I was fortunate. My kids were already at college and left the house. So told my wife, hey, somebody is going to pay for us to move to the beach. Let's go. And we came here and literally took 4 people from the bank, had a small office. I put up a big sign on the wall, nCino Worldwide Headquarters. And that word nCino plays off the name of the bank. It's Spanish for live oak tree. And we just picked the name, didn't spend any money on it, and started the company.
So how humble were those beginnings?
I just have a wonderful opportunity.
How humble were those beginnings when you said you had a sign on the wall? how small was it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you see, that's what entrepreneurship is all about. I would tell people there's no job that I wouldn't do. Plug in pieces, putting tables together, get people to work around me. And when you show that kind of leadership, they'll do anything for you. So it was humble. We had a loan of 3.6 million. And after 1 year, we raised capital in the city in Wilmington. It's about 250,000 people. And I'll never forget, I said, let's raise $4 million. We see what happens. And literally got the people in the room and got pledges for 14 million. We took 7 and then asked the staff, I had 22 people at the time, and we wrote checks for another 1.5 million. And that was the capital of year 2.
So how have you disrupted banking with that money?
So we went into the banks at first and tackled the commercial loan origination space. And here's the big difference. The innovation gap in banks is purely because of IT staff and technology. If you want to make a change, you go to the vendor or you go to your IT staff, you write code for a year, you bring the system back up, and the market has changed. With our cloud-based platform, you can literally make that change on the fly. So the agility and nimbleness of a bank now to make process changes, adapt for regulatory changes, et cetera, is much faster. So we started with commercial, go to the community bank space. There's about 5,000 community banks in the US. Then went to the bigger banks to prove the sync and scale, then went overseas and start building out towards small business and retail lending, as well as account opening and onboarding. So we built that whole suite out. And so we've got the first time ever a platform that is customer-centric, that's focused on industrializing banking. So you can run it like an industrial complex. You measure 2 things, velocity and quality. And that is truly taken off. People understand the concept, and it's a global applicable application.
So how could it possibly even save businesses, this nimbleness you're talking about in these difficult times where, as you said, some people are losing their life savings?
Yes, but so you have to look through the lens of the banker. So all of a sudden you can't go to the branch, or you have to have a special appointment there. And so the adoption of digital channels and doing everything on your phone, and people are getting used to that, and those habits will not go away, just like online shopping. And so what's happening is these businesses have to transform themselves in the most difficult times. And if you can get a foothold in there now, that will only propel them for next year and the year after. So to us, it's a good development. The other thing is we enable people to work from home. All these banks have to function. They have to make loans, take deposits, open accounts. And to work from home now is a big benefit. Their old systems didn't allow them to do that.
So looking at the banking sector, I mean, you were a bank teller in the past as well. I've often asked this question of the CEOs who come onto CNBC Africa, is that how long do you think we're going to be in a situation where we're going to a little building with a teller behind a desk to get to do our banking? How long do you think those days are going to last?
Yeah, no, my personal view is it's all about the branch will become more of an advisory center and a training center for people to get used to technology and understand how to interact with the bank. And there'll be fewer of them, and they'll cover a bigger radius. And then we'll become a cashless society, and we'll do everything by our phones, mobile, and the internet. That's just the trend where things will go. So you'll see less branches and more advisory centers for financial services.
I mean, aside from the economic difficulties of the world and COVID-19, this must be a very difficult time to be in a fintech company. Bearing in mind the United States, there's still this unresolved trade war with China, plus there's this hoo-ha over Huawei. How difficult is it to be in your space at the moment?
As I mentioned, we're on the Force.com Salesforce platform. We see some slowdown in the community bank space, but in the big banks, these are strategic initiatives. The only difficulty we have is I cannot fly into Germany or South Africa to sell software right now. So everything is becoming virtual. But on the other hand, people adapted and they know we have to move forward, okay? So banks keep on operating. There is a contraction of credit. We see that there's not many loans made. They're managing portfolios right now. But as a company serving the banking technology sector, we are still doing very well. And we're very fortunate in this segment where we are playing.
Well, as the world grapples with COVID-19, what do you think is the biggest hurdle you're going to have to overcome in the fintech business, looking the next couple of years?
Yeah, to us, there's two growth levers. The first one is to keep on innovating across the platform so we can actually get 100% of the staff of a bank to adopt nCino. The second one is international expansion. If you look at those two, how quickly will people in Italy, Germany, Spain, Japan, Australia, South Africa actually embrace this level of technology and automation? Okay, so that's our one challenge. The second challenge is all of that agility will actually lead to driving and delivering intelligence at every decision point. And so we're building a whole data lake underneath this platform that will be enhanced by AI, machine learning, and automation and insights, analytics, to actually drive much better decision and informed things at the point of production. That will be disrupting banking in a totally new way. And that's why I'm so optimistic and positive about where we'll go in the future. Now the question is, can banks with their cultures and their conservative nature embrace this at a fast enough pace?
Yeah, do you think they're going to, world banks? I mean, it's a fairly established and entrenched business. Do you think they're going to be agile enough to get onto it, or are they going to start their own ventures?
Well, interesting, last October, I was in Japan and did some press interviews, and I was asked this exact question, Pierre, what makes you think Japanese banks will embrace nCino? And I said, look, when we started this, people told me banks will never go to the cloud because of security. And we said, well, that's an opportunity that nobody else is going to do it. Let's go fast. And after 3 years, we had the community banks wrapped up. And then people said, big banks will never use this stuff. So we entered the big bank space. And today we've got 14 of the top 25 banks in the US as customers. And then we went international. And now we're into Japan as well, which is a very conservative culture. So my view is you cannot stop technology. It's just like cell phones. It's just like the iPhone. Once people get used to that level of accessibility and technology, it will take over the market. And I think that's what you see with people like Tesla, Elon Musk, etc. If you disrupt and you come in and you drive that momentum and you execute well, the sky is the limit.
Have you had any dealings with Elon Musk, or what do you think of him? After all, you were both born on the same continent. Have you ever encountered him?
I know of him. I've never met him. Stylistically, I think we differ slightly. um, but of course, he must be brilliant. It's not only Tesla; it's got SpaceX, it's got the battery factories, etc. Very innovative man.
And what about the African continent as a business? Is it on your radar for expansions? What do you think the potentials are here?
No, absolutely. We are talking to some banks in South Africa, and we'll expand from there. Right now, we're servicing it out of London. And eventually, we also like to get an anchor account. We did the same in Australia. We got Macquarie Bank, and then once we had them, we put a little office down there and grow the staff as business needs. So we will use South Africa as our jump-off point as soon as we get a bank down there to embrace the technology, and then expand beyond that.
How tough a job is that proving?
I do think currency plays a role, the strength of the currency or the dollar strength. It is difficult. South Africa tends to, because when I was there, it was the same thing. Do you use the labor or do you automate? And so it's a bit more of a difficult struggle to get that done. But I'm very optimistic that we will get some banks, and history have proven once we get one or two banks, it's like dominoes coming, because how do you compete with another bank that can do something in a quarter of the time you perform? And then just that competitive pressure will drive the adoption.
Which other countries in Africa, aside from South Africa, are attractive to your kind of banking cloud business?
Right now, because we're expanding into Japan, Australia, and the continental Europe, we're just going to focus on South Africa as a foothold first.
And again, there are elections coming later this year in the United States. There was a lot of talk about Donald Trump making America great again. What do you think that he's done or not done for the economy?
It's very interesting to watch all of this, because a lot of theater, I read the paper in the morning. I don't follow social media every day because there's an event every 2 seconds. It really doesn't matter. But my take on this is the American people always land somewhere on the right spot. And these things will swing back and forth. Obviously, he was elected based on a reaction to a previous administration and frustration with people. These are 50 to 80 year cycles that you see as the socioeconomic environment changes. And I think we're just in one of those disruptive phases. We'll have to see. I'm not going to predict what's going to happen. I believe nobody knows, because none of us could predict it 4 years ago what happened.
What about this thing about, we mentioned the American dream earlier, this thing about working class America. We see stuff all the time, documentaries about how people are struggling like they've never struggled before, how the economy is failing, many of the young generations coming in. What's your take on it as kind of like an outsider and an insider at the same time?
Yes. So here's what I think the biggest disruption was. When I lived in the Midwest, I saw it firsthand. When manufacturing moved out of the US, it truly destroyed many of these smaller towns that was factory towns, was built around big tire factories, aluminum factories, etc. And that was very disruptive for society. But this system allows that to happen because it's an innovation-based environment. On the flip side, when we came to Wilmington, 5 people in a small office. Today, we've got 650 people here in Wilmington. The average salary of a single nCino employee, or the median salary of a single nCino employee, is double that of the median income of a 4-person family in the city. So when companies like this come to these smaller cities and drive innovation and actually drive employment, there's an upside to it. So you have to take the innovation side along with that imbalance. Society is going through this transformation to a technology and services economy. And there's, of course, the big debate, what is poverty and what is relatively a living wage? What I'm seeing is the biggest difference here is that the opportunity is equal for everybody. So if you can go to school and you can study, regardless of your background, your accent, etc., you have the opportunity to come and do this. And that's what we've done. And to me, that's just a fantastic element of the system. The sad part is there are parts of society that's behind, and we as business leaders have to fix that. I believe that government can instigate and help, but in the end, business will drive the change and get people hired. elevate wages, and actually drive the adoption of not only technology, but a better lifestyle.
Just interesting, you said about Wilmington where you raised your first 40 million just amongst the townspeople in a small place of 250,000. What kind of people were they, and how difficult was that to get the money together?
It was amazing. I walked into a room and Chip Mahan assembled his people, obviously some of the wealthiest people of the city here. And I made my pitch. And then the safe harbor statement, he would stand in the back and say, I want to make sure all of you understand, every penny you invest in this company, you may lose. And I would stand in the front and say, wait a minute, I moved my family here. We're actually going to make this a very successful business. And I believe in the future of this. And at the very end, that propensity to take a risk and the willingness to look at this and see credibility in the future, people wrote the checks for 14 million pledges, as I mentioned before. So I think that's a unique characteristic of the American culture, is that anything is possible. They believe the best is yet to come. And as a nation, as individuals, we'll get it done and make it happen, just like the man on the moon. And that underlying cultural element, the very positive, outlook on life is something unique, and I just love it.
And just lastly, Pierre, I mean, do you think you could have come to a similar sized town in South Africa and done the same sort of thing? What do you think?
I think you can, and I'll tell you why. When we first came here, and the VCs, when they got involved and started investing, said, Pierre, wait a minute, where are you going to find the talent? How will you ever do this? And I think if you're innovative and you think outside the box, I mentioned earlier, 125 people, 11,000 resumes so far this year. We moved our recruitment into marketing, and we put a package together and said, look, we live at the ocean. People are on boats on the weekends, great golf courses, fantastic lifestyle. Instead of selling the company as a place to come work, we sold the city and the lifestyle, everything you can do. And we started moving them in. We bring them from Charlotte. When it's snowy in winter up in Cleveland, we'll recruit up there and bring them down here because it's not as cold. So if you think outside the box, firstly, you'll find local talent, and then you move them into a quality of life. So I do think as long as you think outside the box and you focus on the right elements of quality of life, you can get the talent. It's available, it's everywhere.
And just very lastly, very briefly, I'm afraid we've run out of time, but for South Africa and Africa, do you have any long-term ambitions for maybe 10, 20 years' time?
I think about this question a lot. If I could, for one day, be king, that's the old question, isn't it? I personally believe access to information and technology, in other words, broadband, internet access, cell phone access, etc., for the masses, and then access to information. If you can get that widespread, along with some capital infusion, I truly believe in the people. It's very interesting. We're always concerned about the quality of the people and the quality of education, etc. But then if you look, I'm sitting in the US, and some of the most innovative criminal schemes with money comes out of Nigeria and places in Africa. And I go, wait a minute, these people can think up these things. They can think up productive business as well, okay? So I honestly believe that if you allow people the freedom and you give them capital and you give them access to information, with today's world is the internet and cell phones, etc., I think you can really drive an economic revival second to none.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Pierre Naudé coming to us there from Wilmington, North Carolina in the United States. He's the president and CEO of nCino, a banking cloud company that's just listed on the NASDAQ. A man born and bred here in South Africa in the Boerland on a wine farm near Worcester. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for on this edition of CNBC Africa in Conversation. From me, Chris Bishop, it's goodbye.